welcome to the deep dive. So I want you to imagine that it's 3 a.m.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. You're just staring at the ceiling, you're utterly exhausted, but your brain just, it completely refuses to shut down.
Yeah, the classic anxiety loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if, and just stick with me here, what if that anxiety-inducing insomnia isn't actually a sleep disorder?
Okay.
What if it's literally the only time of day that you are actually telling the truth?
That is such a wild premise.
It really is. And today, our mission is to unpack this deeply philosophical, frankly haunting text called the Book of Transmigrations.
It's a fascinating piece of work.
It is. We're going to explore basically what it means to be a human trying to communicate the uncommunicable and how all of this applies directly to the polite fictions you navigate every single day of your life.
Right, because this is a text that fundamentally, I mean, it just shatters our assumptions about self-expression.
Yeah, completely.
We usually assume that, like, a private journal or a diary represents the ultimate unfiltered truth, right? Like the moment the author finally takes off their mask.
Secret self.
Exactly. But this text looks you right in the eye and argues that the words themselves are just another mask.
Wow.
It makes this really aggressive case that language at its very core is the ultimate lie.
And before we even get into the heavy philosophical lifting there, we really have to talk about the nature of this source. Because the framing is completely wild.
Oh, so layered.
It presents itself as this lost, fragmented manuscript written in the voice of the late Argentine poet, Alejandra Pizarnik.
Right.
But if you read all the way to the author's notes at the end, it reveals itself as a modern creation.
Yeah, by two authors, Max and Claude.
Exactly. They wrote it as an attempt to sort of channel her spirit. And they explicitly call it a forgery in service of truth.
Which is, I mean, such a provocative concept on its own. A forgery in service of truth.
Really sets the tone.
It does. And the text is broken up into these stunning little fragments, these strange dialogues and hyper-specific taxonomies.
These are really unique structures.
Yeah. And it tackles the sheer burden of being conscious, you know, the agonizing limitations of the vocabulary we rely on, and these massive hidden shadow selves we all drag around with us.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to really get inside the mind of this text, we have to start with its central glaring paradox.
The whole writer who hates words thing.
Right. The voice we are reading belongs to a writer. Someone whose entire existence, their career, their identity, it all revolves around words.
Yeah.
Yet this is a person who fundamentally and deeply distrusts language.
And it goes way beyond like a mild distrust. The text literally describes language as a graveyard of things.
The graveyard of things.
It calls the written word a house I cannot enter. It pictures the author standing at a closed door with like hands full of keys that open absolutely nothing.
That is such a heavy, striking image. But mechanically speaking, how does a word actually become a graveyard? Like, how does that work?
So the text makes this brilliant argument about the inherent violence of the act of naming.
Okay.
When you look at a table, or say a massive oak tree or the night sky, you are experiencing something vast, dynamic, and undeniably real. But the exact second you assign the word table or night to it, you've inherently limited it.
Because you've boxed it in.
Exactly. You've taken an actual lived multi-dimensional experience and you flattened it into a tiny two-dimensional sound.
Wow.
The author feels that you essentially have to kill the vivid reality of a thing in order to make it fit neatly into a sentence.
I think every single person listening has actually felt this limitation.
Yes.
Even if they aren't poets.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like trying to take a photograph of a massive, awe-inspiring sunset on your smartphone.
Yes. Perfect example.
You're standing there on the beach. The sky is just on fire. The wind is blowing. And you feel this profound sense of scale and emotion.
And then you hold up your little screen.
Right. You snap the picture, you look at it, and it just looks like a neat orange stripe.
So disappointing.
It is. The photo doesn't just fail to capture the sheer scale and feeling. The act of trying to capture it somehow shrinks the reality of what you're witnessing.
That is a perfect parallel. But the text actually pushes that concept a step further.
Oh.
It's not just that the photo fails to capture the sunset. It's that the very act of stepping out of the moment to take the photo, it distracts you from experiencing the sunset at all.
So the tool becomes the problem.
Exactly. The tool you're using to preserve the memory becomes the exact thing destroying your connection to the reality.
Wow.
And the author feels this exact same alienation with every single sentence they write.
Which I guess explains why the text takes us on a tour of what it calls the Museum of Failed Poems.
Yes.
The author admits to hoarding all these poems that just collapsed under their own weight. You know, the metaphors that sounded absolutely profound at 3 a.m. but seemed utterly ridiculous by dawn.
We've all had those thoughts.
Right. And the wild claim here is that these broken, failed poems are actually infinitely more honest than the successful ones.
Because the successful ones are liars.
Liars.
Yeah, the text literally calls a polished, successful poem a liar because it pretends it arrived in the world fully formed, like it was inevitable and perfect.
Oh, I see.
A finished piece of writing hides all the scaffolding. It wipes away all the blood on the floor of the messy, agonizing, creative process.
And then we reach the Museum of Unwritten Poems.
The best ones.
Right. These are the concepts that appeared perfectly formed in the mind, hovering there brilliantly, and then just vanished before they could be forced onto a page.
Yeah.
And the text argues that those unwritten poems are the only truly authentic ones in existence, simply because they are the only ones that haven't yet been betrayed by words.
It really captures the ultimate tragedy of the writer's condition. To write is to betray the thought.
That's brutal.
As the text puts it, I would rather be mute than fluent in the wrong language.
So if our daytime language is just this flattening, limiting lie, and our daily routines and conversations are mostly performance,
right,
when do we actually experience an unflattened reality? Because the text isn't like a purely nihilistic document. It doesn't claim that truth doesn't exist anywhere.
No, not at all.
It just insists you won't find it in polite daytime conversation.
That's the pivot. The text argues that unfiltered truth only arrives when the noise of the day finally dies down, in the dead of night.
The 3 a.m. window.
Exactly. This brings us into the concept of the night hours. The author completely redefines what insomnia is.
Oh, yeah?
They claim insomnia isn't a biological inability to sleep. Insomnia is the refusal to stop being conscious.
The refusal to practice dying.
Right.
Because sleep is framed almost like a small death, and the insomniac is just stubbornly refusing to surrender to the void.
Precisely. And the text suggests that the daylight world is actually the surreal environment, not the night.
How so?
Well, think about the polite fictions of the daytime. We all collectively agree to pretend that things make sense.
Yep.
We agree that putting on a tie, sitting in traffic, sitting in a cubicle, and making small talk about the weather is like a normal way to exist. But at 3 a.m., that polite fiction completely collapses.
Yeah, think about the mask you wore at your morning stand-up meeting today.
Oh.
Or when you dropped the kids off.
Oh, yeah.
How much of your actual, messy, complex self did you have to aggressively edit out just to say good morning and seem functional?
So much of it.
Right. And the text catalogs the collapse of that editing process in a section called the Taxonomy of Silence.
It's a gorgeous section.
It's this incredible granular list attempting to categorize the void. Things like the silence of snow falling on snow.
Yeah.
Or the silence of the city at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But I really have to push back on the author's logic here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because there is a heavy romanticization of insomnia happening in these pages.
Sure, absolutely.
And as someone who has absolutely stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with a racing heart,
we all have.
I have to ask, is the 3 a.m. mind actually accessing some profound, hidden philosophical truth about the universe? Or is it simply a biological reality that sheer exhaustion is stripping away our rational defenses and just leaving us with pure, unfiltered anxiety?
That's the big question.
Right. Are we accessing philosophy, or are we just having a panic attack in the dark?
That is the exact tension pulsating through the piece. And what's fascinating here is that the text itself is highly self-aware about that blur between honesty and delusion.
So it knows it might be crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't blindly worship the 3 a.m. mind as some infallible oracle.
Okay.
There is a specific fragment called Dialogue with Insomnia where the author literally argues with their own sleeplessness.
I remember that part.
The author admits that exhaustion strips away the daily performance, leaving behind a state of mind that feels, quote, barely human.
The author says to Insomnia what's left is barely human. And Insomnia replies, again, closer to truth.
Which is chilling, but logically consistent within the text's framework. The text concedes that at 4 a.m., there might not be a clean line between being honest and being clinically delusional.
Right.
But it aggressively insists that this raw, stripped-down, panic state even if it is terrifying, is a closer representation of the reality of existence than the smiling, hyper-functioning mask we wear at 2 p.m.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you are awake at 3 a.m., the house is completely quiet, and you are entirely stripped of your daytime performance.
Yeah.
Who are you actually alone in the room with?
Well, you're in the room with all the parts of yourself you spent the last 16 hours hiding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The text introduces us to these two haunting figures that live in that nighttime space, the double and the shadow.
Which leans heavily into Jungian psychology.
Yes, the Jungian concept of the shadow, that dark psychic repository of all our disowned, unpalatable parts.
It's the storage unit for everything that fundamentally contradicts our curated good persona.
For the author, the shadow holds all the rage. The naked ambition, the cruelty, the extreme sexuality, the madness.
Everything forbidden.
Right. It's everything that a good girl or a respectable, serious poet is explicitly forbidden from expressing in the daylight.
And there is a phenomenal moment in the text that addresses this directly. It's framed as a letter to Freud.
Oh, that letter is incredible.
The author critiques traditional psychoanalysis by pointing out the highly specific societal burden placed on the female shadow. She writes, "The female shadow is twice the size because we're given half the space."
That line is an absolute gut punch. Twice the size because we're given half the space.
It really is.
But let's look at the mechanics of that. How does culture actually dictate the size of our shadow?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about the physics of emotional repression.
Okay, physics. I like it.
If society or your workplace or your family dynamics tells you that you must be perfectly polite, endlessly accommodating, and that you are never allowed to show frustration.
Right.
Those natural human emotions don't just evaporate. Energy cannot be destroyed.
Oh, that's true.
So all that ambition and anger has nowhere to go but into the dark. It gets forcefully packed into the shadow.
And the less space you are allowed to take up in the light, the more massive the entity in the dark becomes.
Exactly.
And alongside the shadow, the text introduces the double.
Yes.
The double is essentially the ghost of the life not lived. It's the version of the author who was deeply normal, who baked bread, who had a traditional family, and who absolutely did not stay up all night agonizing over the failure of language and the inevitability of death.
The double is the tantalizing fantasy of simplicity.
Yeah.
But the text offers a massive, glaring warning about how we manage these hidden selves.
Because we all do this, right?
Yeah.
You listening to this right now, you curate a persona.
We all do.
You have a highly specific version of yourself for your boss, a different version for your parents, and a highly polished version for your social media feeds.
Of course.
And to maintain the structural integrity of those personas, you have to constantly suppress your rawest reactions, your unpopular opinions, your messy contradictions.
Yeah. And the warning the text gives is about the metabolic rate of that suppression.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you feed the shadow too many lies, if you spend 90% of your energy maintaining the polite fiction,
Yeah?
the shadow eventually grows larger and stronger than the light. And when it gets too big, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It starts making your choices for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that actually manifest, though? Like, how does a shadow steer the ship?
It manifests as self-sabotage or sudden, inexplicable impulses.
Okay, give me an example.
So when you suppress profound workplace frustration into the shadow for years to maintain a team player persona, it metabolizes.
Right.
It turns into deep passive aggression. Or it causes you to impulsively snap at a partner at home. Or it makes you suddenly quit a hobby you used to love.
Oh.
You might think you're just stressed or tired, but it's actually your shadow hijacking your decision-making apparatus because you refuse to give it a conscious voice.
There's a line in the text that illustrates the fragility of this whole balancing act perfectly. It describes the slipping of the mask as turtles all the way down, except the turtles are made of paper and someone is lighting matches.
It's a brilliant visualization of
It's
vulnerability.
a little fragile.
You think you have a solid foundation of identity, but it's just masks stacked on top of masks. Personas stacked on personas.
Yeah.
They are paper thin, and the slightest spark of real crisis will burn the entire structure to the ground in seconds.
So if our daytime language is a flattening lie and our 3 a.m. shadow is too chaotic and destructive to live in safely, it feels like the author is entirely trapped.
It does seem that way.
The paper turtles are burning. Is there a third option here? Where do we land?
There is a third option, but it requires accepting a constant rolling state of grief.
Oh,
Yeah. The text transitions into a profound acceptance of endings in a section titled Las Pequeñas Muertes, the Little Deaths.
This sounds incredibly bleak on the surface. How does a catalog of deaths offer a way out of the trap?
Because the author isn't talking about literal biological mortality.
Okay.
They are cataloging all the psychological and emotional deaths we have to survive while we are still walking around.
Like what?
It's the death of the day when the sun finally sets, the death of our waking consciousness when we eventually surrender to sleep, the death of our foundational childhood beliefs.
Oh, I see.
The death of the idea that romance will magically save us. The death of absolute certainty.
The text actually lists them like an inventory of shedding skins. It says, age 11, belief that there's a reason for things. Age 15, belief that love is redemptive.
It's heartbreaking.
It's acknowledging that growing up is essentially a process of continuous, painful molting.
And the ultimate destination the author's trying to reach by enduring all these little deaths is something they call the cartography of silence.
The cartography of silence.
Yes. If words are a graveyard and naming a thing kills it, then the only true way to understand the world is to map the unmappable spaces between the words.
Wow.
The author comes to the realization that the essence of poetry isn't the words themselves. The poetry is the silence that the words manage to make visible.
I have to ask, though, stepping back and looking at the whole manuscript,
Yeah.
reading through these endless inventories of failure and massive shadows and burning paper turtles and little deaths,
Yeah.
is this entire text just a beautifully written document of despair? Is it just a brilliant mind waving a white flag and giving up on connection entirely?
It is remarkably easy to read it that way if you stay on the surface.
Right.
But if you look at the underlying mechanics of what the author is doing, it is actually a relentless, passionate search for ultimate authenticity.
Okay, but how?
Well, this raises an important question. If language is a guaranteed failure and we are doomed to suffer these little deaths, why keep picking up the pen? Why keep trying to map the silence?
Right. If it's all just a graveyard of things, why not just walk away from the cemetery entirely?
Because hidden right in the middle of these overwhelmingly heavy themes, the author drops this anchor.
Oh.
They write, I hope, despite everything I hope, this is either the human condition or my particular stupidity.
I love that line.
It's so honest. The text ultimately concludes that the goal of writing, and by extension the goal of living, isn't to perfectly capture the world in a pristine jar.
Right.
It's not to achieve flawless, frictionless communication or to build some permanent, indestructible legacy.
So if the goal isn't to build a perfect legacy or capture reality flawlessly, it sounds almost like an act of spiritual defiance, like howling into the void just to prove you have lungs.
That is exactly what it is. The goal is simply to bear witness, to be able to stand there and say, I was here, I saw this, I tried to say it.
No.
Even knowing that the saying was impossible and the words would fail, the attempt itself is sacred. It's the fundamentally human attempt to reach across the void toward another person, knowing your arm isn't long enough.
So what does this all mean?
Good question.
Think about the little deaths in your own life right now. Think about the major transitions you've been putting off or the ones you've recently survived.
Yeah.
Changing your career path, ending a long-term relationship, moving to a new city, or just finally changing your mind about a fundamental political or social belief you used to passionately defend.
It's so hard to do.
Shedding those old versions of ourselves is agonizing. It genuinely feels like a death because a neural pathway or the deeply held piece of your identity is literally dying.
Absolutely.
But according to the logic of this text, undergoing that grief is the only way to avoid living your life as a forgery. You have to actively let the old ill-fitting beliefs die so you can map the silence of whatever comes next.
That's a highly practical way to apply a very abstract text. The little deaths are the mandatory toll we pay for authenticity.
Right.
The Book of Transmigrations, whether you want to categorize it as avant-garde poetry, a philosophical treatise, or a psychological diary, it serves as this incredibly powerful, unforgiving mirror.
It looks right back at you and forces you to audit your own reality. It demands that you ask, how much of your daily routine is just a polite fiction?
Are you feeding the shadow?
Right. Are you suppressing your shadow so deeply that it's starting to make your major life choices for you? And what uncomfortable truths might you actually hear if you stopped making so much frantic noise just to fill the void?
It asks us to respect the silence rather than immediately fearing it or trying to distract ourselves from it.
Yeah.
To recognize that the quiet spaces between our spoken words might carry vastly more truth than the loud words themselves.
It's a staggering piece of work. A text that opens by flatly telling you that words are a lie, and yet somehow ends up using those very same words to make you feel completely seen and understood in your own private loneliness.
A forgery in service of truth, executing its mission right to the very last page.
Perfectly said. And to close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. It builds on a very specific, quiet concept buried deep in the author's notes. The author mentions having a personal museum of unsaid things.
A museum with infinite branching hallways.
Rooms dedicated to things that were left unsaid out of sheer terror. Things left unsaid out of a desire to be kind. Things left unsaid simply because there were no words in the English language big enough to hold them.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine walking through the quiet hallways of your own personal museum of unsaid things right now. Look at the exhibits you've curated over the years. Which room in your museum would be the most crowded? And what would actually happen if, tomorrow morning, you decided to unlock the doors and open just one of those exhibits to the public?